The morning I opened my eyes after a 9-hour spinal surgery, I thought the hardest part of my life was finally behind me. Every muscle in my body felt like it had been stitched together with fire. My throat burned from the breathing tube. My back was trapped inside a heavy brace, and even lifting my hand felt impossible. Then I noticed my phone glowing on the table beside my bed. More than 70 missed calls covered the screen. My heart began pounding long before I listened to the voicemail that changed everything. My father sounded strangely cheerful as he explained that while I had been unconscious, they had sold my condo to pay for my younger sister's wedding. He casually mentioned that the paperwork had already been signed. The money was handled, and I should not upset myself because everything would work out. At that moment, the pain from surgery disappeared behind something far worse. They had stolen the only thing I had ever truly built for myself while I was lying helpless on an operating table. Most people cry first, I never have. Years of serving as an army medic before becoming a surgical nurse trained my mind to slow down during disaster instead of speeding up. Panic never saves anyone. Facts do. I replayed the voicemail several times until every word settled into place. Then I began organizing the situation inside my head like I would organize an emergency room after a trauma arrived. Someone had transferred ownership of my home while I was under general anesthesia. Either my signature had been forged or someone had used authority they no longer possessed. Neither possibility was an accident. I quietly asked the nurse for a complete copy of my anesthesia records, including every recorded minute of the surgery. She looked slightly confused, but she agreed without asking questions. Before my family even realized I was awake, I had already started building my case. That condo was never just another property. 6 years earlier I had purchased it with money earned through endless overtime shifts, military savings, and sacrifices that nobody else ever noticed. The apartment overlooked nothing more exciting than a parking lot, but when I unlocked the front door for the first time, it felt like the greatest achievement of my life. Every payment represented another night shift, another skipped vacation, another holiday spent working instead of celebrating. My parents understood exactly what that place meant because they had watched me struggle for every dollar. A few months before my surgery, my father casually suggested using the condo to help finance my sister's wedding. I refused without hesitation. I believe the conversation ended there. Looking back now, I realize my answer only convinced him to find another way. Fortunately, I had always been cautious. Years earlier, I had given my father temporary power of attorney before deploying overseas, allowing him to handle emergencies if something happened to me. Before my surgery, I remembered that old document and officially revoked it. I even handed him a printed copy across his kitchen table 2 days before entering the hospital. He smiled, accepted the paperwork, and placed it beside a bowl of fruit as if everything was perfectly normal. Walking away that afternoon, I felt relieved because I believed I had closed every possible door. Somehow they still found a way inside. For days after surgery, the hospital discharged me. I slowly shuffled through the hallway with a walker while nurses congratulated me on my progress. Their encouragement disappeared the moment I reached the parking lot. I suddenly realized I had nowhere to recover. The condo where I had installed safety rails, prepared meals, and arranged everything for my healing technically belonged to someone else. I could not drive, lift anything heavier than a gallon of milk, or even bend enough to tie my own shoes. My best friend, Rachel, picked me up and rented a small furnished apartment nearby. While she unpacked groceries and organized my medications, I sat at the kitchen table with a notebook. Every important investigation begins with a timeline. I listed my surgery date, the voicemail, every conversation, every name, and every unanswered question. At the top of the page I wrote one sentence: who benefited from stealing my home. The next morning I skipped calling my parents. Instead, I contacted a respected real estate attorney named Daniel Harper. After listening carefully, he asked only 3 questions. Had my father ever held power of attorney? Had I revoked it before surgery? Did I know who purchased the condo? My answers became more important with every passing second. When I admitted that the buyer identity was still unknown, he instructed me to request every closing document immediately and warned me not to confront my family yet. He explained that people often reveal more when they believe they have already won. My parents visited that afternoon carrying flowers and homemade food as though kindness could erase betrayal. My mother insisted they had no choice because wedding expenses were overwhelming. My father repeated that I had always been the strong one who would eventually understand. Then my mother quietly delivered the sentence that cut deeper than my surgery ever could. She smiled gently and said it was only a condo while my sister would only get married once. I looked at both of them without raising my voice. Calmness has always frightened dishonest people more than anger. I simply asked who had notarized my signature. Neither answered directly. My father finally admitted that someone named Victor had handled all the paperwork. Before leaving, my mother warned me not to create problems because the wedding was only 3 weeks away and everything had already been paid for. They believed the approaching ceremony protected them. They had no idea that every deadline simply gave me another point on my timeline. The moment they walked out, I circled Victor's name inside my notebook, knowing that somewhere behind that single name lay the truth capable of destroying every lie they had built. Within 2 days, Daniel obtained the official property records, and the truth was even uglier than I imagined. The beer was not a stranger. It was my father's longtime business partner, Ethan Collins, a man who had attended family holidays for years and acted like an uncle whenever he visited. My condo, worth well over $400,000, had been sold for only $300,000 in cash. My father had lied even in his voicemail. They had not sold it at market value. They had practically given it away to someone they trusted. Daniel explained that sales far below market value between close business associates immediately raised serious legal questions. Then he compared the signature on the deed with the one I had placed on my legal paperwork. Even without being an expert, I recognized the difference immediately. Someone had carefully copied my name, but they had never copied the way I actually signed it. The biggest breakthrough arrived when Daniel requested the notary records connected to the transaction. Every professional notary keeps a journal documenting exactly when each document is signed. According to that journal, I had personally appeared before the notary at 1:47 in the afternoon on the day of my surgery. I stared at the time until the numbers blurred together. At 1:47 that afternoon, surgeons were operating on my spine while machines monitored every heartbeat and every breath. There was absolutely no possible version of reality where I could have been standing in an office signing legal documents. For the first time since waking from surgery, I felt something stronger than anger. I felt certainty. Before I could decide my next move, my younger sister Emily called. She sounded more annoyed than concerned, asking why I was creating problems when everyone was trying to celebrate her wedding. She admitted she never questioned where the money came from because our parents assured her everything had been arranged. When I reminded her that they had sold my home without permission, she repeated the same heartbreaking sentence our mother had used. It was only a condo. I realized then that nobody had forced her to ignore the truth. Looking away had simply been easier because it protected the perfect wedding she wanted. I ended the conversation politely, but something inside me closed forever. The following morning I visited Ethan Collins' office with the help of my friend Rachel. Walking with a cane and wearing my back brace made every step painful, but I refused to let him see weakness. Ethan greeted me with fake sympathy before insisting he had purchased the condo legally through my father's authority. When I asked why he paid far below market value, he casually admitted my father owed him a substantial amount of money from a failed business investment. My condo had not simply funded a wedding, it had quietly erased my father's personal debt while the wedding served as the perfect excuse. As I prepared to leave, Ethan smiled confidently and wished me luck proving anything from a hospital bed. He believed I had no evidence. He could not have been more mistaken. Later that afternoon the hospital delivered my complete surgical records. Every page contained exact times recorded by doctors and nurses throughout the operation. At 1:45 I was fully anesthetized. At 1:47 my vital signs were stable while surgeons worked deep inside my spine. At 1:50 I remained unconscious under mechanical ventilation. The timestamp on my surgery records perfectly matched the timestamp in the notary journal. One document claimed I was lying unconscious inside an operating room, while another insisted I was standing in front of a notary signing away my home. One of them was impossible, and everyone involved knew it. Daniel called immediately after reviewing the records. His normally calm voice carried genuine excitement. He explained that proving I never signed the deed was powerful, but proving the old power of attorney had been revoked before the sale would completely destroy the entire transaction. My heart sank because I believed the only copy of that revocation remained inside the condo my family had stolen. Then, sometime before dawn, an old military habit saved me. During my deployments, I always scanned important documents and emailed copies to myself. I searched through old messages until I found exactly what I needed. 2 days before surgery, I had emailed myself the signed revocation with a clear timestamp showing it existed before the closing date. I immediately forwarded it to Daniel. Everything changed after that. Daniel prepared multiple legal actions at once. One lawsuit sought to declare the property transfer completely invalid because the authority used to sell my condo had already been revoked. Another complaint targeted the title company whose notary falsely claimed I appeared in person. A criminal referral was also prepared for investigators handling financial fraud. My parents quickly realized something serious was happening. The phone calls became desperate. My mother cried, begging me not to ruin my sister's wedding. My father insisted we could settle everything afterward if I simply stayed quiet a little longer. For the first time in my life, I refused to carry the consequences of choices I never made. A week before the wedding, my father visited me alone. He admitted his business had collapsed and confessed he owed Ethan a fortune. Selling my condo had solved both his debt and my sister's expensive wedding at the same time. Then he asked the question I should have expected. He begged me to pause everything until after the ceremony. Listening to him, I realized he still viewed my life as a resource available whenever the family needed saving. I calmly told him he had not borrowed from me. He had erased years of sacrifice with a forged signature. As he left, he warned that exposing the truth would destroy the family forever. I quietly answered that he had already done that himself. The night before the rehearsal dinner, I organized every document inside a leather folder. The forged deed, the notary journal, my anesthesia records. The email proving the power of attorney had already been revoked. I did not need an emotional speech because facts were stronger than accusations. By the time I arrived at the country club, my parents believed my presence meant forgiveness. Instead, when my father proudly toasted family sacrifice in front of both families, I slowly stood with my cane and calmly explained exactly what had paid for the celebration. I laid every document on the table one by one until complete silence filled the room. Nobody argued because paper does not lie. My sister finally walked across the room with tears running down her face. She admitted she never knew the truth and apologized for refusing to ask difficult questions. I accepted her apology because it was honest, but I also understood that rebuilding trust would take years. A few months later, the court declared the fraudulent deed invalid. Ownership of my condo returned to me, and investigators continued their case against everyone involved. Standing once again inside my own living room, I realized the greatest victory was never the property itself. It was finally learning that love requiring endless sacrifice is not love at all. The strongest boundary I ever built was not around my condo. It was around my own life, and this time nobody was ever going to sign it away again.